Hi, I'm Susie Morgan, founder and director of training at Precision EMDR Academy. And if you are thinking about taking a basic training or even thinking about, should I take one again, this video is for you. And so hang with me because I've been having some really interesting conversations with the people who have taken our basic training as a refresher, or they had started another program and maybe didn't finish it for some reason, and they decided to take our course rather than continue on where they had started. And usually they've chosen ours because they wanted to deepen into complex trauma and attachment, but what they've been communicating very consistently now across multiple cohorts, which is why I felt like I needed to make this video, is that this would have allowed them to feel safer, more effective, more able to know where on earth to begin, and not so scared to begin. I had one person this last week tell me, she's like, it's the same 6 days. I could have learned all of this in the same 6 days, and now I've spent twice the money, and now I've spent twice the time, but now actually my clients can get better faster. So let me line out some things. There's kind of two major pieces that I want to share with you that are really critical for how we do things differently on purpose. The first is what we teach and why we teach it. And then the other piece is how we structure the training. Now, both of these evolved because I have been doing EMDR for 20 plus years at this point, but I've been a consultant for 15. And so in the course of being a consultant for 15, I got to see patterns. I got to see where clinicians were getting stuck, where they were frightened, where they were confused, all of these different pieces. And I started noticing I'm needing to teach a lot of the same things across the board to all of these different clinicians. And so when I sat down and made the decision that I was going to create a basic training program, it was based on having this kind of bird's eye view of people who are coming through different training programs and having kind of consistent stuck points or various stuck points. And so everything that went into constructing or creating the structure of this program was informed by all of that time with people who really wanted to do EMDR well and just were struggling. So the first half is, what do we teach? So number one, backstory with EMDR, Francine Shapiro, when she created EMDR, it was based on creating a treatment for single incident PTSD. And it's so good that she did, because in that there became some incredibly valid, robust research that said EMDR can change things in ways that are really phenomenal for our clients who are suffering from severe trauma. But then, as time has progressed, because now EMDR is 30 years old, and we have all been practicing it in our offices, or now on our Zoom screens, with people who have layers of trauma, who have, they have big T traumas, but they have little T traumas. They have these adverse life events that left a mark. But then also what we've become more and more aware of is part of the story is the early attachment, the experiences of not having those needs met, and how that actually impacts a person's symptomatology and what they struggle with, especially in their relationships, or even foundationally to their mood symptoms or their anxiety and things like that. And so now, 30 years later from where it began, it's so important, I think, as a trainer, that I am equipping you to treat the clients that you see, because you're barely ever going to see someone who walks in with one bad event. I can remember two clients in my whole history of being an EMDR therapist. And so my experience as being an EMDR therapist was to go to training after training with all the greats in the field, all these incredible minds, but then I had to cobble together what worked from here. Try this. Okay, that didn't work. Try this other thing. And I also was like, oh goodness, I want this to be effective. I want this to be safe, but I also would like this to be a little bit more efficient than this sort of cobbly together thing that I've got going on here. So ultimately I created a system, a strategic structure, so that I could really see things from the front end that would make a difference for me getting stuck midway. I could organize things so that they could move more rapidly, more efficiently, and ultimately create change where my clients needed that change most. So the training teaches you that. What we start with is readiness capacities. That's the stuff that makes all the difference in the world with complexity. We start with teaching you to have eyes to see what your client's brain and nervous system have the capacity to do, and how that directly relates to EMDR reprocessing being safe and effective for them. And then also, what do you do if one of those readiness capacities isn't there or is kind of on the weaker side? How do you navigate that? In addition, how do you navigate things like dissociation and even understanding what all that word can mean and what all those symptoms can implicate? Because it can mean a variety of things, and you really need to be able to swim in those waters with a sense of confidence. And then we work towards mapping the trauma memory networks. So specifically, what are those experiences that your client has gone through, big and little, that are driving their symptoms, and how do you connect the dots between those two so that you really know how to target what matters, and then how do you order that targeting so that you can optimize generalization of your work. There's this incredible thing with the way EMDR works with memory networks, in that if we target in a specific order, we can end up having to process less material, because the brain will go, oh, this applies to this, and this. And then our client doesn't have to stay in therapy as long with us, which is huge, because that means their suffering, their struggles reduce so much quicker for them. So then the other thing that we do is we really map the good stuff that's there, or the absence of that good stuff. And so that's all of those things in our clients' adult life, their adult functioning, their adult relationships, experiences, all of that. But specifically, we also map those early attachment experiences and the patterns throughout their relationships across their lifespan. And we map it in such a way that it's practical. You know exactly how it is impacting what you need to do and why with processing the trauma memory networks. So you're knowing, do I need to do more prep work before I do reprocessing, or do I need to do things strategically once I get in there so the processing doesn't stall out or create more distress for my client as we go? So all of that really matters, and it makes such a big difference. But here's another layer that we add, is we use our practicum time with you to have you go through that whole process for yourself, so that you get a sense of like, oh, this is what this means. This is what it feels like to ask these questions, to map these things. And then when you're doing your clinical practicum work, where you're practicing processing with each other, you get that same experience of generalization, which there's nothing like the difference between me teaching something at the front of the class and you feeling it and you going, oh my goodness, that is nuts. And I can see in my daily life between this practicum practice and the next week's practicum practice that my responses are feeling different. That matters for the learning process. Now, one of the big reasons why someone will choose a non-EMDRIA-approved training is because they don't have to do practicum. Now, honestly, if I was sitting in your shoes, I might consider that too. Number one, those programs are oftentimes cheaper. Sometimes you'll hear some nightmare stories about things that, that don't happen in our program, but where you'll have, someone who's called to practice in front of the class as like an example, or you're practicing in these large group setting, and so everybody's seeing you cry and all these different things, and so it's just super vulnerable and messy. And so for us, it's still vulnerable. It still pushes you, but with protections, with good reasons. And so, because we're on Zoom, you're allowed to practice in these private breakout rooms where we as your staff come and check on you and see how things are going. And you only have one consultant who you're paired with through the whole time. So that person's keeping an eye on you. That person's tracking you. That person is your safety net, basically, to, ping if there's a question or if you're concerned. You're not lost in the crowd when you're doing this vulnerable thing. We've got you while you're learning this from the inside out. And, well, I can understand being like, oh, I would rather save the money and I would rather not have to do that, can tell you that the reason why it's part of the EMDRIA-Approved trainings is because it makes all the difference in you really getting what this is like, what it requires of the client, but also what it gives to the client. So that last piece is also another major component of how our program is different. We have a 6-to-1 ratio. You have a mentor, not just a staff member. This is a person that you matter to, who's tracking you, and who's also communicating with me if I'm not your direct consultant during the program, so that I know what you're needing, and we're thinking about more ways that we could support you. Like, we have a neurodiversity specialist who works with the team. There are, brainstorms that we're doing of saying, like, what can we do to help this person to feel more equipped to do this work based on whatever challenges they're having in their clinical setting or things like that. So this is a much more personal program. When we say it's boutique, it is boutique because you are not a number. You are not 1 in 200. You are a human clinician that we actually really care about and want to care for well during this learning process, because we know it will matter for how you then are able to care for your clients. The other thing is then our structure allows you to continue that mentorship after the basic training ends. And in fact, we really encourage that because basic training provides your framework. We try to provide you the best foundation we absolutely can for complex trauma attachment, knowing all the procedures, knowing the protocol backwards and forwards as much as we can in 6 days, but it's literally 6 days. And so what you really need is more. You need more support in order to have fluency in this. And so we provide a pathway for that that's structured that you can immediately jump into with the same person you worked with, or someone else from our team if you connected with that person more, as you go forward, so that you're not just dropped off and lost in space, because that's not going to help you do this work well. So the one other thing that I think is worth pointing out is that our structure is 1 day at a time. That can feel frustrating because it's like, oh, I could just knock this out in a 5-day stint, or I could, just take 2 weekends out of my life and then be done with this. The problem is that makes it more likely that you will lose so much of the material that you absorbed, simply because our brains are not able to learn in that fashion. It is really necessary for us to be able to chunk things, digest things, apply things, then get another big chunk and digest it and apply it. And that's how you actually learn things deeply and learn things well. In addition, this is exhausting. This is intensive. And so what it means is that if you are falling asleep on day 3, you're not absorbing. You're not getting the most you can out of it. And we want you to get the most you can out of this, because this work is powerful and this work matters. So I would love to be able to connect with you personally. If you're on the fence, you want to know more about any of these details, there is a form on our website where you can schedule a call with me. I will give you a call back. We will chat about any and all questions that you have. And if you are listening to this and you're like, I don't think that I need the whole basic training again, check out our advanced courses, because our recorded refresher allows you at least to get the material, but then also our advanced courses that are used as curriculum or companion curriculum to our consultation groups are also an option. So you can learn all these things at that more advanced level with that mentor support that we offer. So join us in any of these ways and reach out to me if you have any questions at all.